Thanks for being here today. We're excited to talk about the results of the network survey that we did as part of the celebration of the 50th anniversary of NAPCRG. I'm Danielle Varda from Visible Network Labs. I'm the CEO and founder, and proud to be a part of the work that NAPCRG has been doing, especially to capture some of its real successes as an organization growing over time and building a strong research community around primary care. So I'm going to get started. I will tell you a little bit about us. So Visible Network Labs is a social enterprise. We have a mission to help people leverage network science to strengthen supportive connections. Primarily, our focus is around building strong social connectedness. So we do that through technology-based data and mapping tools, which you'll see some results of our use of that today. And also we do a lot of learnings as training and workshops because we have a value and a mission to help build capacity inside communities to think about how to build supportive connections and strong social connectedness using some of these concepts. So our goal is to get it out to as many people as possible to create opportunities for collaborative innovation. And our primary work is around making invisible networks visible. So we know that there are all kinds of networks around us, both at the systems level and the individual level, but they're largely invisible both to ourselves and the people who are trying to care for us or help us. And so our goal is to make those as visible as possible because we've seen the results of that. The results of being able to see these things, measure them, and understand them often results in better outcomes, both at systems and individual level for people. The reason that we do this work is really something that we call the network way of working. So this slide used to say the new paradigm, but really we are in a whole different age right now where the network way of working is pretty common. So the idea that we can work across boundaries or build network partnerships, both in our communities to strengthen people's social supports, but also to build things like communities of practice and information sharing networks, research networks. We have a belief now that if we can build those ties, we call those the weak ties in our networks, to build up on a concept called the strength of weak ties, then we can actually get to a better outcome than if we were to work alone in our silos. But again, to see those relationships makes that work even better and easier for us to accomplish. So that's one of the reasons that we do this work. And what you're going to see today is the results of us using a social network analysis methodology to look at how this community has built up over time. And we use the partner platform. So partner stands for Program to Analyze, Record, and Track Networks to Enhance Relationships. It's a long acronym, but it is exactly what it does. And we actually look at that from two lenses. One is called Partner Me, which might be of interest to folks in this community because it's our way of helping clinicians, providers, and we call them helping professionals, people who help others. It allows them to see a person's personal support network, identify the strengths or gaps, and allow them to use that information in their care. So this is allowing us to put a social connectedness screener, often connected with some form of social determinants of health or social economic screeners, and mental health screeners together to really look at how people's social connectedness influences their health, mental health, and wellness outcomes. But the work that we are going to show you today is based on our tool called the Partner CPRM. So the CPRM is a community partner relationship management system, and it might sound a little bit like a CRM. Many folks come to us and have a CRM, which is meant for primarily customer relationship management. And those are focused on building sales funnels often. But we have seen the need to track these kinds of networks over time, and not just once as an evaluation, but to track ecosystems and the building of these networks over time so that we can really leverage those relationships. So we're going to show you some work from the Partner CPRM today. It's primarily based on this idea of social network analysis, which includes network mapping. But I always say the maps are just the front cover of the story of our networks. And if we open that book, behind it are the measures that we use to understand the quality, the content of those relationships, the outcomes of those relationships, and how we might use that information both to demonstrate the return on investment of building these networks, but also to build strategies and action steps for ways that we might improve them. This is just another screenshot of our partner me. We're not going to go through that today, but I did want to just make sure I kind of put it up here because I know it will be of interest to folks who are in this space. Okay, so I'm going to get started with a little bit of level setting. I'm using the word network, social network analysis, things like that. So just to define what we mean by network. So when I say networks, I mean these nodes and lines. And whether you might call these partnerships, maybe strategic alliances, collective impact, we measure all of those things as networks, as nodes and lines, because we are applying a methodology that allows us to conceptualize both the nodes, which would be things like people or organizations. It could also be thoughts or beliefs. More people today than ever are thinking about ecosystems, and ecosystems include all kinds of objects, including people and organizations. So that's one way to capture that. These nodes have characteristics, attributes about them that make us able to understand patterns around how they're connected. So from something more simple like a gender description to understanding their responses to how they answer questions. We can color the nodes through those kinds of things. And then the relationships between them are really what connect these dots. And a lot of folks ask us, what do the relationships mean? And they really mean whatever it is that we've asked people to describe them at, or how we've coded them. So this could be a friendship network, it could be client referrals, or simply, something like that we're talking about today, which might be relationships that prompt information sharing, collaboration around maybe gathering funding or publishing papers. So that's what we're going to continue to use throughout this, is this concept of networks. But something that's going to come up later in this presentation is really the tie here is a tie which we would refer to measured at the dyadic level. This is a whole network. These are any two nodes, and the relationship between them are the dyadic relationship. And much of what we'll show you today is based on basically collecting data at this level and then aggregating it up. So it makes it really distinct from other ways that you collect data, because collecting it at this dyadic level allows us a very nuanced look and lens into the work that we wouldn't get if we were basically just doing like a normal kind of survey. So I have been talking about a methodology called social network analysis. This is one that is kind of a mix between a quantitative and a qualitative approach. It allows us to collect quantitative data, but also often with some qualitative concepts. But what it does is collects data on who is connected to whom, how those connections vary and change, and with a focus on patterns of relationships. For example, we might be looking at the type of relationship, the extent of the interaction, maybe the quality of the connection. I've already mentioned the nodes and lines, but just real quickly, I'll just describe here how the answering a survey turns into a map. Let's say in this picture here, we asked all of these people to answer who is a friend of whom. And we can see here that Garth said he was a friend of Bill. We know that because the arrow went this way. So if I ask all the people in this network to tell me who is their friend, whoever picked someone else will get an arrow facing, and some have a reciprocal arrow. In this case, Garth said he was a friend of Bill. Let's say we gave them a scale of 1 to 3, to say 1, not really a friend, to 3, a very good friend. So we can get a valence on that relationship as a 2. We can see here that a few things. Bill may not have picked Garth as a friend, maybe does not actually think Garth is a friend. He also might consider a friendship, define it differently than Garth. So they might have the actual same relationship, but define them differently. Or Bill didn't answer the survey. So we learn lots of things just from the picture, but that's how the questions that ask us to pick others turns into insights like this. All right, so now that we've kind of done a little bit of background and level setting, we're going to go right here into our network survey results. So this was something that we were asked to partner with the folks at NAPCRG with to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the organization. So this occurred in 2022. We're now in 2023, so looking backwards a little bit. So just a little bit of what that means. We were asked to partner. So in April 2022, NAPCRG conducted this survey with us to demonstrate the growth and impact of its professional network over time and identify opportunities for continued development. Myself, and I'm guessing most of the people who'd watch this, are part of these kinds of professional organizations. And while we go to the conferences and we're part of the communications, it's really difficult to really see the larger, broader scope of what has been built and built over time. And there's questions, of course, always, are these professional organizations doing what they could do to build these research communities? What's the impact of that? And aside from just, getting to see old friends at conferences, we truly believe that there is a kind of knowledge and information sharing that will improve the way that we can do research and learn about new innovations and share findings. So one of the things that we were really hopeful for was to test some of those assumptions about NAPCRG and even other professional organizations to say, does it work? Does it really work when we invest so much of our time and resources into these kinds of relationships? So our methods for doing that were to invite current and past members and other participants who connect with NAPCRG to respond to a survey. That was a total of almost 6,000 individuals. So that is just a lot of folks to reach out to. You can imagine just the cleaning on the email bounce backs was pretty time consuming, but we tried to get a really clean list and we were able to invite those individuals through an email to participate in the survey. So the email would have said, this is what we're doing. And if you click on this link, you can answer the survey. NAPCRG also publicized the survey via social media outlets, programs, and events. So there is possibility that there are others in here that were not targeted through those original emails. We got a total of 906 individuals to respond, which we do a lot of community-based work, and that would be an enormous amount of folks that responded in a community, but this community is global. So that's not as many as we would hope just to get a really strong finding. But what we know is that every person who responds tells us something we didn't know before. So we learned a great deal from the respondents based on these 906 responses. But in addition, they not only answered questions and were able to look at the other members of the network to respond about, but they also added 815 individuals who didn't respond to the survey, but with whom the respondents had a relationship. So that's a method that we refer to. It's like a snowball methodology. It's called a name generator, where we would ask people to be sure to include folks that they are connected to because of NAPCRG, but perhaps were not invited or did not take the survey. So that resulted in 1,721 individuals represented in the network. So that's how many nodes we have in this network that we're going to show you. And also data about the relationships between them. So the N for responses is 906. The N for nodes that we have in the network is 1721. And I'm sorry, I don't have the number, but the N for the number of dyads that we have, so I said any two nodes and the relationship between them, will be a data point, is exponentially big based on how many people each person picked. So we have the network analysis approach is quite fascinating because you just get layers and layers of systems information. All right, so I'm going to show three perspectives of the results. So the first one is a descriptive perspective. So this is kind of stuff that you could get from asking questions on any kind of survey. And then I'm going to get into relational and then a little bit more of evaluative kinds of results in here. So I'm just going to go through these. There were a lot of results and there's a report, but I thought the best thing to do today would just be to do an overview of as much as we could of what we found. So this is really just descriptive of the community. So of the responses that we had collected, we asked what kinds of positions people held. So not surprisingly, 32%, a third, were physicians. And then there were other primary care researchers in there. And then you'll see a smaller, for example, student community or patient community. And every time I look at a data point, I think, what is the action step I could take to address what I'm seeing? And I know a lot of professional organizations are beginning to focus on person-centered, patient-centered, or student affinity groups. So there's often strategies around, how do we bring in those kinds of members into our network? So there's clearly lots of opportunity for that here, but not a big surprise. And we also asked folks what other organizations that they might participate in addition to NAPCRG. And we just thought this was an interesting data point that people could see to really see how they connect with others in the same kinds of ways and other kinds of professional groups. So just another data point that might seem really familiar to folks, maybe also a little bit new. So here we asked about how many years would you say that you've attended the NAPCRG conference or been involved with NAPCRG? So most of the folks that responded said under 5 years. So one thing we did notice is that overall the respondents were those that were members in the more recent years than in the years past. But we do have a number of folks in here that have been here as long as 41 to 50 years. And some also 10 to 20 or 5 to 10 years. So what we do see here is that there are quite a few, a quarter of folks that have been here over 5 years and up to 10 years. So there is a lot of people who stay in the organization over time. And we'll see later, hopefully that's because there is a benefit to them. Oops, and so sorry, this must be a little bit, I apologize. I want to make sure that we can see this. There we go. So this finding, my apologies for that. We also asked after your first year of attending the conference, did you also attend the following year? So what we see here is that almost half of people did come back the next year, but we have 40% that said no. And so in terms of building strategy around how to continue to build this community and also have some sustainability over the group, we might take a look at this and, what would help incentivize people to come back year after year. All right, so we also asked what kinds of things respondents are participating in, what kinds of events, NAPCRG events that people participated in. So what we saw here is that the majority of participation is in the annual meeting, and we'll see past participation was 51%, both current and past is green, 29% in annual meetings, and current participation only is 13%. So we have seen some attrition across this group of respondents in terms of saying they've only participated in the past. That's another area that we could probably hope to improve, this green bar in this question. We also have events including the International Conference on Practice Facilitation and the Practice-Based Research Network, which is a large amount of folks, but just some areas these are good data points to see where we could focus on even making some changes. So this asks which NAPCRG programs do you currently participate in or have participated in the past? So here we see that most folks have said either grant generating projects, building research capacity programs, or trainee programs for fellows, residents, and students. And this is really great. This is where we start to get into a little bit of the things people said that they do and that are doing outside of the annual meeting, for example. So as we go through this, we'll see some pretty positive results of both network building and then also the outcomes of that network building around results that demonstrate success of research partnerships. Okay, so those were a little bit of our descriptive partners. And so now I'm going to look at it from a relational perspective. So I brought this picture back again, just really quick here, just to remind us that most of the data I'm about to show you is a result of capturing the outcomes of one organization saying that they are connected to another organization, and then capturing the way they describe the outcome and the content of those two relationships. And so what we're working on in this section is trying to show you how we actually connect those responses to information to share about the whole network. All right, so one way we were looking at outcomes was around the question of how has the growth of NAPCRG evolved over time. So what we have seen, and so this is a little tricky because what we see here are folks that responded to the survey tend to be those that attended in the last 5 to 10 years. So not as surprising that they said they have more connections in these later years. I think had we been able to capture more respondents that attended in earlier years, this line might be a little bit more flat in terms of their relationships. And so what we mean by that is that although this is showing a growth around that, we weren't really able to capture some of the folks who have been a part of the organization of the last 50 years. And so I think we would see also that there have been quite a few relationships built similarly over time. We did map on here. This is just a little bit of an illustration of some of the achievements and milestones of NAPCRG and how it mapped on to some of that growth. And so you'll see in 2012, NAPCRG celebrated its 40th anniversary. And then back through that, you'll see some other time points in which NAPCRG made some kind of seminal accomplishments. Okay, so when we looked at the whole map, so this is a really like, what am I looking at kind of moment, but these are all of those nodes, the 1,700 nodes that we mentioned showed up in our survey. And these are representing individuals. So a network map, and again, I mentioned this is like the front cover of the story of the network. So illustrative in a lot of ways, a little bit difficult to navigate because it is so full. But if you were using this as a tool, you could do some exploratory analysis to look up individuals and their relationships, but we're not doing that today. But here, this does show that there is quite a few different types of folks who are here. And then you'll see a lot here in the center, which are highly connected versus these on the periphery, which are connected through maybe just one or two. Another way to kind of look at that is through a little bit more of a zoomed in lens. So we just pulled out, and these are in the report, so just a couple of folks here who stood out as having the greatest number of connections. And so these folks, you'll see the code kind of up here, and then the actual individuals in here. It's really neat to be able to zoom in on those and explore those relationships. But also, if we take them out, we start to see things like how a network starts to come apart. So we call these folks often our key players. Key players can be folks who are like this deeply embedded. They can also be people like this out here who seem to be connecting a lot of others. But if we remove them, we would lose quite a few connections to the other parts of the network. Those are positions we call centrality, and these with high numbers of connections have what we call high degree centrality, where folks like this one on the external edge would be what we call high betweenness centrality, where if we pulled them out, we would fragment that network. So there's lots of really interesting parts of the structure of this. So I'm only going to go through that at a really high level. But this was really fun. We thought we would share this. This is just a little animation of how the network grew over time based on how people said they were connecting to others. So this is really only for fun that we show this, but to also just kind of make a point, these networks are dynamic, and to watch a professional organization, for example, in this way, grow in this manner, is really kind of fascinating, especially if you know the story of the work that went into building out the program and the organization to make this kind of relationship building possible. Okay, so just a couple of other things. This is a question that just asked, in approximately which decade did your relationship with this person began? And again, we have folks who responded who are primarily attending in the last 5 years. So not a total surprise that we see that a lot of those have shown up in the last decade, but it is also an indicator of the growth, the way that the network has expanded over time. So we do have an increase in that. And again, just to kind of show in a typical survey, we might ask a question like this and we could see the line graph. From a network perspective, this is the same data, but in a different visual form. So there's really a strength to having data in this way that allows us to see kind of the world in a different way. Okay, just some last few things about the relationships. When someone picked someone as a partner, we asked them questions. So if I picked 10 partners, the question would say, please characterize how my relationship with this individual developed. And I would have answered about 10 people. So that would create 10 dyads. So what we did is we take that level of analysis, all the dyads, and show it at an aggregate level here. I hope that makes sense. So this is really a representation at the relational level. So when we asked how the relationship developed, we do see that the majority said through other venues and work not related to NAPCRG, but that's okay. But we did see also, because there's lots of different ways that people are relating out in the world, but we did say that almost 30% said that their relationship developed because of NAPCRG committees, work groups, trainings, events, or activities. And another 40% said that their relationship was not developed through NAPCRG, but their engagement has deepened the relationship. So in total, we have, it's not, these are not mutually exclusive, but we have about 70% that did say that their relationships were either created or strengthened because of participating in NAPCRG. So that's a really neat way to look at, for example, systems building, and to say, what did we accomplish, and how many people have new relationships because of us. So we call this a way to measure attribution. So the attribution of these kinds of relationship building to the work of NAPCRG, building of research community, is fairly strong. So this is some nice indicators of how that's occurred. We asked some other questions, just kind of simple, like, how frequently do folks work together on primary care research or NAPCRG activities? Not surprising, most folks, about a third, said once a year or less. While we have some, though, that said once a quarter or less, we have a small group that work together every day or every week, and even about once a month. And so those could be organizations of, hospitals or clinical communities that work together. But this also could be research groups that we know have been built by members or fostered and nurtured over time. So kind of neat to see that there's some frequency of interaction. But we also said, okay, when you connect with someone else, what kinds of activities does this entail? So again, this is at the dyadic level. And this is probably the most surprising finding for us in all of the work, was how much actual outcome related activity was captured in all of this. Over 63% of the dyads that were reported said they've collaborated on a paper. I found that to be outstanding. I didn't have any idea that would be so high. And I don't even think I'm a part of a professional organization where that it would be true. But collaborating on work projects other than a grant or paper was very high, 60%. Collaborated on a grant, 44%, mentoring or co-mentoring, 40%. Lovely to see over a third of folks said friendship and social activities, and then just visiting departments or each other's departments is pretty neat as well. So, this says so much about, we have developed a professional organization. Yes, we have an annual conference, but the outcome of that professional development, that professional relationship building, is pretty astounding, I think, with these results. So pretty excited to see that and be able to have some numbers associated with what is probably a lot of stories that people can tell about that kind of activity. Okay, a couple more. We've also said, okay, what is the result of this partnership? I apologize, there's a few little icons in these pictures, but we asked them, okay, when you've connected with someone, what has this partnership resulted in? And you'll see most people have said it expanded my network or improved my skills, knowledge, and capacity. But 58% said led to a research paper, 34% led to a research grant, and 45% led to an exchange of resources. And you'll see up there, 42% said led to an improvement in or advancing the field of primary care. And I think these are things NAPCRG can just shout from the rooftop, saying, when we bring people together, these are the kinds of things that are possible and can happen. So if the question is, should we be investing in this kind of relationship building and professional development, I think these results are a clear yes. This was surprising, I think, to us. We also asked, like, what's the highest level of ways you collaborate with this individual? 60% said integrated, which is a direct reflection of all of the outcomes that I just reported, meaning that integrated, we said, involves cooperative and coordinated activities, as well as formal partnerships that produce a grant, paper, or other work product. And so we just saw so many results that said that was affirmative. So not surprising, there's a lot of integrated relationships. This is a scale that we developed at Visible Network Labs, where often our recommendation is that we want to stay in the as much as possible in the coordinated area, because we're looking at, for example, community organizations who, don't really have the resources to get into integrated relationships, and cooperative may not be in depth enough. But in this case, integration is resulting in publications, research, funding, and things like that. So we would say the more integrated relationships, the better in this case. So quite impressive also. Okay, just a couple of very last slides here. We were not asked to evaluate NAPCRG, but we asked some questions that were more evaluative from their perspective. So we wanted to share those as well, because they also are very telling about the organization. So I've just done it again. I apologize. But what we want to show you, let me go down to it here. So there we go. So we asked, how successful has NAPCRG been at supporting its members in their pursuits as primary care researchers? So these are no longer relational responses. This is what I would refer back to as our normal kind of survey. So we had 842 people answer this, and we can see that the majority of folks said either successful or very successful. So there is quite a sentiment among a pretty large number of members that NAPCRG is doing some pretty good work that they feel really confident about. So that was a really nice outcome as well. But we asked, okay, well, what contributes to that success? And you can see that the activities of meeting regularly, bringing together diverse stakeholders, creating informal relationships, and exchanging information and knowledge are those things that have been, that respondents said were the most likely to lead to those successful outcomes. Things like sharing resources, working groups, collective decision-making and action were not mentioned as much. But this is really the reason I call this evaluative is we really need to look at, like, what is the goal of the network? And if those things that are our goals are leading to good outcomes, we know we're doing well. So having a shared mission and goal might not be a stated outcome of this network as much as, for example, meeting regularly or exchanging information and knowledge. So lots of good indicators there that we're on the right track. And then this, I brought in here, this will be something you might want to look at more deeply if you take the slides from this and take another look at it. But I'll spend a moment here, because these were just scales that went from not successful to completely successful, just asking some perceptions of the respondents of how they felt about how well NAPCRG has achieved some of these things. So for example, years of conference attendance. So you can see where folks felt there was mostly success or complete success at achieving years of conference attendance in these categories. I kept this one as primary location. I think that there is some discussion that could be had around whether there is a desire to reach more international members, or if this just feels okay. There's no judgment in this. And things like NAPCRG event participation, program participation, and committee participation. So the respondents had some views about how these different kinds of activities were either successful or not. I didn't bring it here today. We had one more finding that shows which committees folks sat on, but it seems that the area where people are feel that NAPCRG is most successful is around event participation and program participation, a little bit stronger than committee participation. Okay, two last things. Just we asked a question, what unique benefits and value, if any, do you derive from participating in NAPCRG that you don't derive from participating in other professional groups or organizations? And again, this is something that I thought was surprising because most professional organizations would just say networking is probably the number one thing that is an obvious outcome. But here the question was specifically, what do you get here that you're not getting somewhere else? So networking showing up as the first response did surprise me. I thought it would be a little bit more common across professional organizations, but I think there's something special about the NAPCRG community and connections that people are feeling really attached to and also successfully activating and nurturing. We did ask for just some open-ended quotes, and I'll pause here just for a moment. This one was on the topic of international learning. And so you can see this respondent from Australia talks about the value of the exchange of relationships and information, growing research skills, and things like that. Very positive. We have a set of quotes around the community. This person describes NAPCRG as a spiritual home, nurturing environment, expert colleagues, challenging intellectual environment, skill building opportunities, international networking, opportunities for personal and professional growth, and a place to call home. So, very, very inspiring. Some quotes about the conference and the benefits attending that, and also some mentoring quotes that we were able to capture around the benefits. And lastly, just a little bit on networking, some focus on primary care and research, and learning from others. So we'll be able to share these out, but we pulled out ones that did highlight the strengths and successes of NAPCRG. Okay, and so I will end there, and we don't really have a open Q&A, although I will pause and ask. We have one participant here, and Bob, I just wanted to see if you had any questions that we could share out or comments while we are still in this recording.
No, thanks, Danielle. Appreciate that. I don't have any questions, but I really enjoyed the presentation, and there were a couple observations. For example, who the main nodes were, the most common connections, and at least a few of those high performers were on my list too. So it's there were no surprises for me, and I suspect the rest of your audience will recognize a lot of those names as well.
Nice.
But thank you for the great presentation. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm just going to make one comment on when you said you called them high performers. And one thing that we've learned with networks is that more is not always better. So we would call those high networkers, but
Okay.
there's research questions that ask, are high performers the same thing as highly networked people? So a great research question that you just posed, I think, at the end of this. So
it is fascinating, but yes, and I was really struck by the value of the networking and the collaboration on papers, which I've seen and never really thought of those. So also great insights there. So thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we will go ahead and end things there. Thank you for your attention and your interest in NAPCRG. It's clearly a strong community to be a part of. We were just really pleased with the opportunity to have a chance to partner and take a good look at this and learn so much more about what appears to be a very successful attempt at building a professional organization. So well done, NAPCRG, and thank you for our time together in partnership.